This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jennifer LaGrassa. Katarina is away. Friends are remembering an elderly Leamington woman whose son has been charged in her death. CBC's Dalton Chen has more.
Friends of an elderly homicide victim in Leamington are mourning her as a woman of faith and kindness. Anita Goodings, 83, was found dead at her Shirk Street apartment on March 12th.
She was the first in line to do anything.
She had lots of love.
Yeah.
For anybody.
Yeah. I just thought when she died, her last breath here on earth is the first one in heaven.
Carol Hummel and Louise Weggett had known Goodings for more than 30 years. They met attending Seventh-day Adventist Church in Leamington. The friends often played games like Rummy Cube and enjoyed Bible activities like memorizing the book of Revelations, a contest Anita won.
Anything to do with the Bible. Me and her were in contest with Revelation. She won the trophy.
If you found her Bible, you could tell it was well used. Beautiful woman. Just beautiful in every way, shape, or form. I don't know.
Kevin Goodings, 61, has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder, police say. Hummel and Weggett said Kevin Goodings is Anita Goodings' son, and he'd been living with her since December. A former bodybuilder and bouncer, Kevin Goodings has an Instagram page filled with videos of his kickboxing workouts, including several the day before the homicide.
She asked him to move in because he didn't have a house, he didn't have a car, he
was living off the street a lot, I heard, so I just...
He didn't have nothing.
We're going to miss her terrible.
She died way too soon. She didn't deserve what happened to her.
As of Tuesday, funeral arrangements for Anita Goodings had yet to be announced. Dalton Chen, CBC News, Leamington.
Now that allegations of racist comments from Windsor's police chief have been confirmed, the Black Council of Windsor-Essex wants change and an apology. CBC's Jason Vio brings us part 2 of this exclusive story.
I think it's the expected response for people that really don't want to have to look at the issue. You know, that's just what you sweep it under the rug.
That's Leslie McCurdy, chair of the Black Council of Windsor-Essex, reacting to the fact that the Windsor Police Services Board hasn't publicly said anything about the internal investigation into the chief making racist remarks. The oversight body also isn't sharing what consequences, if any, Windsor Police Chief Jason Belair will receive because of his actions.
What can we do to make sure that these kinds of incidents don't happen again? You know, like there are all kinds of steps that could be taken, but brushing it under the rug is the typical response of people who don't have the experience, having people around them feeling comfortable with saying derogatory things and laughing it off.
This week, CBC News exclusively reported that an internal investigation substantiated allegations against Belair. A summary of the investigation didn't say exactly what comments Belair was found to have made. That investigation was finished in January. Inspector Ed Armstrong was the one who filed that internal complaint. He also filed allegations against Belair with the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, which is still ongoing. In those documents, Armstrong said Belair made several racist remarks to him at work, including a comment about bananas and black people. The other allegations from Armstrong include Belair asking him to use his black magic to ease criticism from a local university professor, referring to her as a black radical, suggesting there is telepathic communication among black people, saying he preferred whiter things, and mentioning needing a black friend to accompany him to certain events. Both Armstrong and Belair didn't respond to our requests for a comment. When asked in an email to confirm whether the allegations against Belair were substantiated, Windsor Police spokesperson Gary Francoeur said the information in your message is not entirely accurate. However, he refused to clarify what he meant, stating he can't comment further because it's before the Human Rights Tribunal. In that summary of the internal investigation obtained by CBC News, the investigator said Belair believed it was a safe space when those comments were made.
There's never a space for comments like that. I think, coming especially from someone in a leadership role, there is a responsibility to ensure that you are mindful of, what you say.
Now, the Black Council of Windsor-Essex is pushing for more anti-black racism training at Windsor Police, an apology from the chief, and a conversation.
Let's just talk. Let's have a conversation, because that never happens either. And often that's the first step to bridging differences, is just having a conversation.
Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
If you took a walk or drove by the riverfront, you might have noticed that the big Canadian flag is back in action. Over the weekend, the flag had fallen down. It was damaged. The windy and rainy conditions also didn't help. The city has sent it out to be repaired and pulled another one out of storage to hang. It's always great to see it flying above the city there. Colette Kennedy is here with weather. Colette, what is it looking like out there?
Well, I'll tell you, we've had some kind of gusty winds to help, get that flag waving like that, as you see. And those winds carry on into the evening hours. And really, it's the direction that's pushed that milder air in and really, driving those temperatures up. So it's a warm front that kind of turns into a nearly stationary front. But the important part is we're into that warm air and we stay there. So that overnight tonight, very mild indeed for the overnight low. That's well above where a daytime seasonal high would be at this time of year. So 10 degrees tonight. There will be some cloud cover. There will be some around tomorrow too, but at times we'll get into more sunshine. So it's going to be sort of variable through the day with a mix of sun and cloud. 19 degrees for that high. Yes, the winds remain breezy tomorrow, gusting up towards 40 or even 50 kilometers an hour. There will be rain coming as we go into Wednesday night, and I'll have the details on that coming up.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
At Queen's Park, more MPPs had their swearings in today. Under this term of government, they could receive a bump in pay for the first time in more than a decade and a half. Lorenda Redekop has that story.
Everywhere you look at Queen's Park these days, there seems to be a celebration after another MPP is sworn in. Some returning, others brand new.
This is the first interview.
How did it feel?
A little nerve-wracking.
The PC's Michelle Cooper won a tight race in Eglinton Lawrence.
A lot of door knocking in the bitter cold. Didn't matter, cold, snow, sleet. I was out there.
Assuming she's at the base MPP salary, she'll earn just over $116,000, an amount frozen since 2008. Way less than federal members of parliament make, and also less than the pay for Toronto City councillors. There's a big range across the country for provincial politicians' salaries. $119,000 in BC, $106,000 in Manitoba, though they'll be getting a raise later this year, and also the following one. And in Quebec, they earn $131,000. Earlier this month, Premier Doug Ford sounded open to an MPP raise.
It's terrible. They have no pension, I don't want to sound like a bleeding heart for politicians, but come on, folks. These guys work their backs off, and it's not fair.
But he also said this.
That's not our priority, right? It's not our priority to line our pockets or whatever. Our priority is to line the pockets of the people that elected us.
Cooper's response?
Well, I'll leave it in the hands of the Premier, and we'll see what happens.
The NDP's Lisa Gretzky had her swearing in, bringing along her 4-year-old granddaughter, Luna.
I was making fun of faces.
You were? What was it like for you to be in there?
Well, it was like a super duper place in Toronto, and I just love this place. I don't want to leave.
Gretzky hasn't left since she was first elected in 2014 and has always earned the same salary.
I think it's fair to say that every person, regardless of where they work in this province, should be seeing regular wage increases to meet with inflation and the cost of living.
She'd like all parties to discuss the issue, something the Premier also suggested. But for almost 17 years now, both Liberal and PC governments have refused to touch the issue.
I don't think going to the public and saying we'd like to increase salaries for politicians is ever a popular idea, but it's probably one that needs to happen if we want to have the best people in our elected offices.
It is well past time that MPPs get a raise. MPPs should also have a pension. We want to attract the best of the best to public service.
One way MPPs on the government side can get a raise is by being appointed to cabinet. It pays almost $50,000 more. But Premier Doug Ford has been criticized for his supersized cabinets. His picks for this term will be unveiled tomorrow in the official swearing-in ceremony. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
As Donald Trump keeps up his threats on Canada's sovereignty, other Western allies are looking for ways to defend the West without the U.S. Canada and Europe are looking to become closer to each other. CBC's Evan Dyer now on what an alliance could look like and what Canada could bring to it.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. You're right now not in a very good position. You're gambling with World War III.
Mr. President, the 6 weeks since Donald Trump assumed office have come close to breaking the Western alliance.
We're living in the most momentous and dangerous of times.
I said, if you're not going to pay your bills, we're not going to defend you.
It's in our interest that NATO survive. If it doesn't survive, we'll have to be prepared to think of other alternatives.
Europe is rearming on a massive scale. Countries are introducing mandatory military training, even talking about going nuclear. But where does that leave Canada?
It only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have.
Lately, Canadians are feeling threatened mainly by the United States. Europeans are not. So why would Europe invite Canada, with its small and understrength military, into a mutual defense pact?
The single greatest risk to Canada has always been Canada alone in the world. If we don't make a concrete offer to Europe, and Europe goes it alone, and we don't have a partner that values us in Europe, our only option is to draw even closer to the United States than we already are.
But there are those in Europe who want to keep Canada inside the circle.
Canada is the only non-European country that's been invited to these meetings. Of course, it's a NATO ally, which makes sense, of course, because first and foremost, a sense of common values and an equal commitment, to upholding the international order, which is being severely strained at the moment.
If there is a security agreement, it should be even-handed, and it should encompass also the idea to defend Canada.
Canada may never be able to offer Europe much in the way of troop presence, but it has other things that Europe needs. Europe has been struggling to get off Russian oil and gas. It remains dependent on liquid natural gas from the US.
Europe is significantly open to energy extortion by the Trump administration.
It is much better to finance Canada and to receive Canadian fossil energy.
That requires Canada to build pipelines to get its oil and gas to the East Coast. The Europeans have also shown strong interest in Canadian renewables, but again, the infrastructure needs to be built.
If I was a politician, I would be saying, every factory in Canada that's going out of business, we're going to figure out how we can make it part of the defense industrial complex and how we can provide for our European partners.
Well, first,
and Canadian politicians are starting to pitch this country as a valuable ally in search of a new alliance.
Why? Because we have all the energy necessary, we have all the fertilizers and potash necessary, we have all the uranium necessary, the hydroelectricity, the oil and gas, we have all the people, the critical minerals, the talent. I could go on and on and on.
An energy and natural resource superpower with a large landmass far removed from Russian missiles. A place where European allies can train their forces and safely manufacture arms and other critical technology. That could be the basis of a new grand bargain between Canada and Europe at a time when the US is no longer a neighbor that Canada can trust.
That was the CBC's Evan Dyer. 7 years and 4 months. That's over 2,675 days since Julio the cat went missing. The local owner had lost hope of ever seeing him again, but the cat came back.
A concerned resident brought in this tabby cat, a male, because they saw him on the street and he looked really thin and walking not well, and so they were concerned, so they brought him in, and our staff immediately microchipped him to see what they found, and sure enough, there was a microchip, to the surprise of the person that brought him in. We could tell right away that the animal needed some TLC, needed some medical attention, but we first wanted to make sure we contacted who was registered at the owner, and we got a hold of her right away, and she was shocked because she lost the cat 7 years ago. I think she was like an utter moment of silence, like, are you sure? There's no way, there's no way. And she came in and it was her cat Julio. What a reunion that was. She had all but given up hope. We had one earlier this year, was a couple of years, but 7 years? No, this was just unbelievable. And I had said to her, I said, obviously, it's had a rough 7 years. Have you seen a lot of differences? She goes, you know what? His traits are all still there. She says he is just lapping up all the attention and really kind of exploring around and trying to feel comfortable in his environment.
What a lovely story. If you have a story you think we should cover, we want to hear from you. You can reach us at text 519-984-2051, or you can email us at windsor@cbc.ca. More news is coming up. Mark Carney is back from his first trip abroad as Prime Minister, but he's capping off his travel to France and the UK with a visit to Canada's north, where he announced a deal with Australia to build an early warning system in the Arctic. But the immediate political challenges he faces stem from the south. The CBC's Rosemary Barton has more.
At a time when Canadians have become increasingly concerned about sovereignty, Canada's new Prime Minister went north of 60 to shore up Arctic security.
The world is changing. Our adversaries are increasingly emboldened. Canada must be strong in our partnerships, particularly NORAD, and today's announcements will strengthen our commitment to NORAD. Well, that is true. We cannot and should not look first to others to defend our nation.
Among those threatening the North, Russia and China, and an American neighbor that is increasingly aligned with those very nations. The modernization of NORAD was already promised by the Liberal government, but in this last leg of his trip, Mark Carney confirmed a $6 billion partnership with Australia to develop and install a new radar detection system. The money is part of the previous announcement of billions. The need to improve NORAD has been an ongoing criticism from the U.S. There is hope this will help.
Securing Canada is an absolute strategic priority of this government. We will need to do more. We will do it deliberately. We will do it in a way that gets effective value for money, that delivers true security.
There is also a plan to expand Canadian Armed Forces operations in different locations in the north, and money towards upgrading power plants and improving housing.
Canada's national identity as an Arctic nation was built on the backs of our communities. The Arctic plays a strategic geopolitical role. We are Canada's gateway to the Northwest Passage.
A signal the sustainability of the North is also key to diversifying trade in a changing world.
For New Democrats, investing in defense means investing in people.
In recent weeks, leaders of other parties have been north to make promises about Canada's security.
Our safety, territory, and trade with the U.S. requires we take back control of our north.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre promised to build a new base in Iqaluit by cutting foreign aid, but was criticized for not consulting with Indigenous people first. Of course, this is also about Donald Trump ahead of the Prime Minister's first call with the President. When that will happen still has to be confirmed, but Carney warns Canadians it is not one meeting that will solve all of the current challenges. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, Iqaluit.
Canada's annual inflation rate jumped up to 2.6% in February. It's the highest in 8 months. And as CBC's Nisha Patel reports, more increases could be on the way.
The end of the sales tax holiday last month helped push prices higher for goods like children's toys and books, alcohol and meals at restaurants. Canadians also paid more to go on holiday, as strong demand pushed up the cost of travel tours by almost 19%. So inflation in Canada came in hotter than expected in February, 2.6%, up sharply from 1.9% the month before.
Our eyebrows are raised because we were looking at this. We're like, okay, how sustainable is this? This is the question we have. Is this going to be something that's going to persist?
And there could be more inflation in the months ahead as the trade war between Canada and the United States drags on. Retaliatory tariffs and a lower loonie could push prices here higher. Economists say that puts the Bank of Canada in a tricky position. Policymakers need to weigh holding interest rates steady to keep inflation in check or cutting rates to boost the economy.
The big issue for the Bank of Canada is that tariffs in and of themselves is a big growth shock to Canada. And we wonder how much more insurance the Bank of Canada wants to take out to protect against the downside potential of tariffs.
There are other moving parts for the central bank to consider, including the removal of the consumer carbon tax and the possibility of a fresh round of U.S. tariffs at the beginning of April. The Bank of Canada has cut the key interest rate 7 times over the past year, from 5% down to 2.75%. Now economists are divided whether the bank will pause or cut again at its interest rate meeting next month. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
We've got more news coming up. Stay with us. Colette Kennedy is back with more weather. Colette, I have to be honest with you, as we're getting closer to spring, spring is actually my least favorite season.
Oh, why is that?
I know. Well, I don't know. I think I just want to jump right to summer, you know? But this year,
Yes.
I'm kind of like liking the anticipation. Like we're building up to that warmer weather. It's getting me excited the more I like notice the trees blooming and the birds and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I love to hear the birds chirping myself, and I'm not a winter gal, so spring is like, it's not winter. So I like it. I like summer, and fall, it means winter's coming, so I backed off on loving it like I used to as a kid. But anyway, speaking of that battle between winter and summer and spring, which comes in between, look at this very cold air in place. We've got another big, broad storm system that's crossing the continent. On the warm side, 22 in Chicago, Duluth at 1. I mean, that's the kind of contrast that we're experiencing. 18 in Windsor. So all that mild air in place with the cold air behind, there are blizzard warnings across the northern plains. So that's kind of what's coming out on the colder side. We stay on the warm side. A normal high is 7 and we're at 19, and a normal low -1. Well, it was a little cool this morning, but still it was above freezing. So some of the other current temperatures, 14 Chatham, Kent, the wind coming off the lake, and 16 there for Sarnia. And you see that southwesterly breeze. They've been a little bit gusty at times, and we'll actually have some gusty winds tomorrow, especially into the afternoon hours. Otherwise, just a bit of cloud cover kind of coming in through the overnight hours, but it will be dry tonight for southwestern Ontario. Things start to change over as we go through the day on Wednesday. Now, not early in the day. Yes, we'll have some cloud cover, but it stays dry and it will be mild. Now, I've paused this at 8 p.m. and on the doorstep, here comes this line of showers. That will start kind of wave 1. Then there'll be a heavier wave closer to midnight. This is just after at 1 a.m. that will push through. And then on the backside, we'll still have some showers into Thursday. But later on Thursday, I do caution you, there's going to be a flip of the switch. And that colder air moves in, and we may even get some flurries kind of coming at times through the afternoon, depending on the timing with that moisture going through and that colder air moving in. Overnight temperatures tonight, very mild. 10 degrees for our overnight low, so staying on the mild side of things. As for the rainfall, by the way, we're probably looking at 5 to maybe 10 millimeters towards Chatham, Kent. 19 tomorrow. Spring moves in on Thursday, and not quite 10 degrees, but not that cool either.
Thanks for that, Colette, and thanks for watching. Have a good night.
Good night.